Yeah, we're all set.
Everyone good? If everyone could please rise for the pledge and then stay standing for a moment of silence for all of our servicemen and women around the globe that can't come home this holiday season. I pledge of allegiance to the flag of the United
States of
America,
America,
to
the
the
republic
To the republic,
which stands,
one
one nation,
under
under
God,
God, indivisible, with liberty
liberty,
and
and
justice for all.
justice for all.
Thank you. Before I hand it over to Dr. Pelletieri for the superintendent's report, I had asked him just to talk to the community a little bit about how they can make sure they get all the correspondence. I keep getting messages and texts, and I see posts about people are not getting the district messages, they're not getting their building messages. So if Dr. Pelletieri could just kind of walk them through that, that would be great.
Certainly, I'm sorry that that's happening. Anytime you're not getting any messages, certainly if it's a school message in particular, you can contact the school. But my office does a lot of this. My secretary, Randy, who's wonderful, will take any phone call or email. She will call you back. I'm volunteering her right now. I hope she's watching. I hope she sees this. Hi, Randy. So she will gladly take people's emails, enter them into the portal, the e-schools, whatever it is that has to be done. We will get it rectified. Very important that we communicate. And if you're not getting it, I can imagine how frustrating that is. You know, we have a snow day tomorrow. A lot of important information goes out through many different channels. So happy to have that come through my office. Again, if it's for a particular school, you can contact that school. But any question around communication or not getting resources, not getting emails, phone calls, anything like that, you can contact my office. Good.
Thank you so much. And then you can keep going with the superintendent's report, please.
Thank you. Thank you. Superintendent's report. I'm actually going to turn it over to Erin at this point. She's going to talk a little bit about midterms and regions. We know that regions were canceled in January, but we have a little more news on that.
Thank you, Dr. Pelletieri. So over the past few months, I met with our report card committee. It's comprised of students, staff, and some parent representatives. Obviously, a big topic for us has been around assessments and grading, the use of Google Classroom consistently. And a portion of that conversation was around midterms once we learned that the January regions were being canceled. Most of our staff and feedback that we got from our families, and then of course the representatives on our committee with us, felt like the week of midterms was not one where we wanted to not have instructional days because of the hybrid and remote learning and you know, everything else going on. Staff wanted to continue on with their curriculum and felt like that was a better use of our time. So therefore, because we're not going to be using midterms, any of the weight that will be adjusted to the averages by the end of the school year will be equally divided across our 4 quarters.
So Erin, at the end of that day, at the end of this conversation, the fact of the matter is we are giving more time to teaching and learning, more time to instruction. We're going to capture that time back. Regions were canceled, and now those blocks of midterms are as well, so we can spend more time in terms of teaching and learning.
Yes, we did survey all of our chairs, and they spoke with all of their departments. And again, you know, that was a pretty major consensus, was that the staff wanted to be able to use those days more for instruction. We also had some conversation around grades. So I don't know if there's any questions around that, Dr. Pelletieri, but I'm happy to also speak about, you know, anything along those lines as well with the report card committee.
I think we'll jump back into grades a little bit later, perhaps, but
Great.
that's good for right now. Any questions from the board on midterms and regions being canceled and using that time to capture instruction?
I just wanted to ask, does that necessarily mean there's no finals in June as well?
No, not at all. The state has not recognized that or decided on that yet. So there still could be regions. There's still, we would always have some type of assessments, just like there will be a midterm. It just won't have the weight that it was. It will not have that blocked time. It will not have that schedule that it had in the past. And so the same perhaps for finals. We don't have all that information yet, but definitely regions are not canceled yet thus far for June. All right, Matthew? I wasn't sure if you froze or you're, yeah, excellent. Thank you so much. Anyone else? Outstanding. Thank you very much. So my next piece is kind of a COVID update, and we've been COVID all the time in Sachem schools. It's been really difficult. It's actually all over the island, all over the state. It's taking up a great deal of everyone's time and focus. And there have been approximately 180 new cases since November 23rd. It's an enormous amount. So we know it is spiking in the community. We've talked about testing. We have not met that threshold yet. So we have not had a need to test. We are gathering more information about testing that we saw in East Islip, and we'll disseminate some of that information in the coming days. However, it has impacted us. COVID has impacted us in a variety of ways, in particular at the secondary level. And a concern that I have now is that we are at a point where teaching and learning is being impacted by student absences, by staff being out, by quarantines, quite honestly, of students and staff. And it's gotten to the point that it's really difficult to have the education for our students that we want them to have, that we pride ourselves on. So what I'm planning on doing is for January 4th through the 8th, and this is important news and new news, and I will detail this in letters in the next few days, but January 4th through the 8th, when we return from the holiday break, the plan is to transition to distance learning for January 4th through the 8th at the secondary level, just at the secondary level in the 5 secondary schools. And that is in part because of, again, quarantines, absences, the impact on teaching and learning in that level. Now, our students, unfortunately, are hybrid at that level, and most are used to being able to work in this hybrid environment or remote environment. North School, as you know, North High School, a couple of times already this year, transitioned to distance learning. And so now we would transition all 5 of our secondary schools to transition them to distance learning. Now, you may say to yourself, well, why not elementary? This is not about safety or health. This is about being able to properly educate our students, our 6 through 12 students and our elementary students. What I will do is during that transition to distance learning for January 4th through 8th at the secondary buildings is take the resources from the secondary buildings, such as substitutes, permanent subs, day-to-day subs, aides, monitors, things like that, and move those down to the elementary level to support their work. Our elementary teachers, our elementary principals have done an incredible job having our students all in this entire year. And those rituals and routines are in place. And I spoke to many administrators and teachers around this idea and felt that the elementary model with our all-in students has been working to such an extent. And yes, there are quarantines there as well, but not to the extent, and cases not to the extent that we have at the secondary level. So we feel like we can provide them with support from the secondary level in those buildings and then return everyone back to in-person learning on January 11th. That's the plan. I wanted to talk with the board about that tonight. See if you had questions or concerns. Obviously, we're always concerned. We're all concerned, but I wanted to hear from you in regards to that plan. I saw Jim, you raised your hand first, and then Rob.
Yeah, Chris, have you spoken to the teachers and administrators about this? And if so, what's their opinion on that?
I've spoken to teachers about this. I've spoken to administrators about this. I actually spoke to parents that I know very well as also, and all were in support of this plan. The concerns at the secondary level, the amounts of absences with students, the quarantines for students and staff are numerous, and it's really impacting. We're at the point now where we're covering classes, but not doing the educating that we want to do. And by getting all kids in the secondary level together again in their classes, because distance learning allows for that, the A and B cohorts together, the kids will see each other again. That was something that North experienced. They did very well with it. They have a bell schedule to follow, and we would do that. We would also record lessons in case someone couldn't follow that bell schedule because they didn't have a device, for example. So we would make sure that we were doing that. But all 3 constituencies, I'm going to tell you, and this is rare, right? Where my teachers, my administrators, and my parents that I spoke with felt that this was something that they could get behind. Jim.
Can I just a part 2 of that, if you don't mind?
Yeah.
Why that particular timeline? Like why those particular dates January 4th through January 8th? Why not shorter or longer?
So it's through that first week back. It's actually 14 days from Christmas Day. I know we will have people gathering over the holidays. I know we will have people gathering over New Year's. I don't want to make it too long. My concern is that the governor is going to act soon and we may end up with a much bigger closure than we want or expect. And so this actually would be something that we would use as time to, if in fact something like that were to happen from the governor's office where he would mandate some type of shutdown. I hope that certainly that doesn't happen, but I think that first week back gives us the strongest opportunity to get back to normal. My goal is to get everyone in as soon as possible, as soon as it's safe. And I think by having the secondary students distance learning that first week, it actually allows us to get closer to that goal.
Thank you.
Of course. So Alex, you should probably be calling on people. I'm sorry, I'm used to my teacher role. I'm calling on people already, but Rob was next.
It's running smoothly. Go ahead.
Dr. Pelletary, just a quick question. You know, I know that this has come up even in my own school. If we're going to go to that you know, that remote learning for the secondary level after the holidays, will staff have access to their classrooms where all of their resources are, to have access to their smart boards, have access to their computers where their lessons are, to help the remote learning take place a little bit smoother?
Fantastic question, very thoughtful. And yes, the plan is that we would allow staff to come in and use those resources in the building. The plan would also be to allow staff to be home and use those resources there and set up where they were last year, or set up their spot so that they know that this is happening in plenty of time. I cannot, people have said to me, have all staff in. I can't do that. The live streaming is not ready yet. So we're not going to do something that is not going to work. We know that. We've talked about that many times. So to answer your question directly, yes, we will allow staff to work from school where they have those resources, or work from home.
Okay. And then part two of that question would be is that we have plans of doing a deep cleaning and thorough disinfecting of all the classrooms while they're empty.
We can do that during the holiday break as well. I just have to always, every chance I get, I commend the staff in the buildings. We are not seeing spread that we're seeing in other places within our buildings. And that is something that's really important to me. So yes, we will do that any chance we get.
And then lastly, being that the buildings will be empty, have we contacted some of the companies that are doing the smart schools bond work, you know, especially particularly with the wiring of the schools, to try and get them in there for a period of time to try and expedite and speed up the process of wiring the schools?
We just expedited something. I know Mr. O'Keefe was talking to me yesterday about bringing in extra teams. I don't know if it's particularly during that time, John, or, but I know we are working to expedite.
You know what? Yeah, several weeks back, I gave them actually the recess schedule for all three recesses, so they could ramp up any of their work during our closures and run 2 or 3 shifts, whatever they wanted to run. So they are prepared to ramp up during the closure.
Great, thank you.
Anyone else?
Just Alex, just one question about the COVID update. I know Dr. Pelletary has been doing an excellent job in updating us. I know that we put a survey out, you know, asking the community to determine whether or not they would feel comfortable with their children being tested. Have we gotten the results back as to how many people have submitted the survey?
We do actually. Thus far, of those that have responded, 40% or so have said yes, that they would have the consent to their child being tested. And Patty, I'm sorry, I don't know if you have that specific number. I don't want to put you on the spot, but I recall it was about 40% said yes. And we're nearing kind of the numbers we need to get to, if in fact we did reach an orange or yellow zone.
I think I'm talking more of total responses.
Yeah. Patty, do you have that number?
I looked earlier. I don't have the exact number on me. It was a little over 3,000 this afternoon. And
Yeah, I was going to say, so about 3,000.
yeah, we were close. We were definitely over 40% yeses at that point. And that is just for the community. That wasn't including the staff. The staff responses are much more yes than no's. So we are definitely way over the 40% the 20% that we would need at that point.
The reason why I asked that, Dr. Pelletary, is that I run into people all the time in the community, and I work with people that live in the HM community that work in my district. And I think people are look, you're going to get people that are going to say absolutely not, and I understand that that's their decision, but you're going to get people that also say to me, I would do it, but I have a lot of questions. How is it going to be done? Who's going to do it? I looked on a couple of other school district websites where they have a commonly asked questions as to how the process is going to happen. Do we have something like that in our district that would clarify some of the questions that many of our committee members would have pertaining to, how is a child going to be notified, length of time between they're tested, notification of the results, would a student have to quarantine, time frame, so on and so forth. These are, I think, oral questions. I think you get a lot more responses from the community if we had answers to those questions on our websites.
Mr. Scavo, that's almost a setup because that's a great question. Erin
Not
and
intentional.
Patty, I don't want to accuse you of that, but Eddie and Patty have visited East Islip where they did testing. We have this wonderful FAQ that's being finalized. There's even a little video of one of our staff members getting the actual test so people can see what it looks like. And it runs through all of those steps in a staircase of what happens first, second, third. Yes, parents of elementary kids can come during the testing. Like there's a lot of things that I know are on people's minds. We're going to get all of that out. We lost a day tomorrow, as you know, by the snow day, but we will get that out Friday. We will get that out Monday of next week, certainly before the break. And we also are opening up the survey. Initially, we had said you can only use your Sachem Gmail. We're allowing other emails to use it as well. It'll be a little more work on our end in terms of connecting it to an actual consent form. This is to say, yes, I would do it, and then we would send you an actual consent form when we get there. It'll take a little more work on that end, but we're willing to do it. So Erin and Patty, yes, have done a fantastic job on that. Gary and Shannon went over there as well. So we're happy to get that out as soon as possible.
Great, thank you.
Of course.
Dr. Pelletieri, I just have a few questions. My first one is if we close at the secondary level, what happens to the students that attend BOCES? Will they not attend for that week?
No, I will speak with Mrs. Lutz over at BOCES and we will work on transportation. John is working on, Mr. O'Keefe and Joe Severno working on a plan already that would take our students to those BOCES locations.
If we voluntarily close, this is not a state order from Governor Cuomo, so we're doing this out of an abundance of caution. Are we still providing food service to our at-risk students?
We spoke about that as well. We will come up with a plan for grab and goes or things such as that.
All right. And then my last one is, if it ever happens, athletics is supposed to start on January 4th. If we're not back until the 11th, the schedule is already set. Teams are, they need a certain amount of practices before they play a game, and the games are pretty much right after the 6 or 7 days. So if we don't allow them to start on time, how will that affect schedules and our athletes who decide to compete?
It would affect them, which is why, again, I've tasked Patty and Erin, not Erin on this one. Erin gets a lot of other things, but Patty and Gary and Shannon to come up with a plan. Again, this closure or transition to distance learning is not about risk assessment or safety and security. It's more about teaching and learning. So we can allow the athletes to come in with their coaches. I know winter track, for example, I hope they're going to do a lot of their running outside, but we can work with those groups to allow that type of access.
Good. Thank you.
We'll come up with a plan for that. We'll disseminate it through the coaches.
Thank you. Anyone else? All right. Thank you, Dr. Pelletieri.
Of course.
We're on the top of page 2. Letter F is approval of minutes. Can I please have a motion for the November 18th, 2020 meeting? Motion by Meredith, seconded by Bill. Any questions? All in favor? Opposed? Motion is carried. Number 2 is visitors. Unfortunately, we're meeting in Zoom tonight and we don't have visitors on the Zoom. So we are going to suspend the public portion. It's the suspension of policy number 2350 for the December 16th, 2020 meeting as it pertains to the public comment in regards to the governor's executive order 202. Number 3 is business items, consent agenda A through F. Can I please have a motion?
Motion.
Motion by Matthew, seconded by Jimmy. Any questions? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion is carried. On the bottom of page 3, it's personnel, teachers, consent agenda A through K. Can I please have a motion? Motion by Matthew, seconded by Rob. Any questions? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion is carried.
I step in.
Sure.
During the course of that consent agenda for our personnel items, we had a teacher that we would just want to recognize this evening, Ms. Carla Wozniak. Ms. Wozniak has been with the district for over 20 years, and she's been a health teacher here on the secondary level, and she's currently at Seneca Middle School. You know, now more than ever, we all know that making sure that our students are cognizant and learning about healthy lifestyles, that's really been a main focus for Carla for many years. We wish her much luck and happiness in her retirement, which is coming up on February the 1st. And she really has made some great differences in the lives of the students she's had. So congratulations.
That's Carla.
Sorry, you deserve more of a clap than that, but this is, welcome to Zoom.
Zoom.
We are in the middle of page 7. Personnel, support staff, consent agenda A through G. Can I please have a motion?
Motion.
Motion by Jimmy, seconded by Rob. Any questions? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion is carried.
Can I step in one more time?
Of course,
We
anytime.
have 3 folks who are also retiring. Joe Beal, who is a security guard who's been roving around Sachem, making sure that our community is safe and our students. Carol Kavanaugh, a cook at cook at Seneca. She was actually, had her daughter at North many years ago. And Gina Labato, who's in transportation, making sure that our students get back and forth to school safely and happy each and every day. So we congratulate each and every one of them on their retirement as well.
If just as we move through the agenda, if you guys can either unmute yourselves or just give a thumbs up when you're saying yes or no, or thumbs down, just for the purpose of recording. We just need a little bit more participation just for Zoom purposes. On the top of page 10, we are in personnel, administrators, letter A. Can I please have a motion? Motion by Bill, seconded by Meredith. Any questions? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion is carried. Number 7, there's been a slight change. We're going to do contracts, consent agenda A through I first. A through I. Can I please have a motion? Motion by Rob, seconded by Jimmy. Any questions? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion is carried. We're going to stay on contracts, consent agenda, letter J. It's the Town of Islip Summer Program. Can I please have a motion? Motion by Bill, seconded by Matthew. Any questions? Rob?
Just one question. When I looked at the contract, this is obviously for use of 2 different buildings as well as some of our facilities or fields. You know, I don't have a problem with Town of Islip or Town of Brookhaven using our property. I really don't. We've always had a very, very strong relationship with them, and you know, I support the relationship we have with them. But you know, right now with everything that's going on with COVID, I mean, we told all of our youth organizations that they cannot use our facilities. We have a swim club that doesn't have a home. They have nowhere to go. They're traveling in and out of Nassau County. You know, we have a soccer program that kind of had to go on hold. That's comprised of 1,000 of our children that don't have a place to field. But tonight we're going to approve, you know, facility usage for the Town of Islip. You know, and I'm I'm concerned. I understand why they had to do it this early because they're trying to plan, to be able to put out some publications so that they can get people to maybe join their camps and whatnot. But you know, I just have a concern that we're telling no to our taxpayers, but we're saying yes to the Town of Islip.
John, I also have a question. I'm on mute, right? Okay. How much are we charging the Town of Islip for this field usage or building usage?
Neither municipality pays anything towards use of facilities. They're intermunicipal agreements.
I think that our town of Islip residents that just saw their tax bills would be extremely upset about the town of.
Well, this is who
Islip.
that program benefits.
Yeah.
It's town of Islip residents who utilize the summer camp.
But those are town of Islip. They could live in Brentwood, Central Islip, Islip Terrace, East Islip. They don't have to.
The majority, though, are Sachem residents because they run similar programs in multiple school districts.
Okay.
And the program doesn't start until July, and it's still pending the ability for the program to run if there's not restrictions due to COVID. The program didn't run last year either.
I'm on the same wavelength, excuse me, as Rob. If we're going to allow outside groups, which I consider the town of Islip an outside group, and we consider SIAG and we consider SSC and Sachem Soccer Club outside groups, then we should really have the conversation, maybe not today, but very soon, about allowing everybody else back on the fields and in the buildings, and allow them to start making schedules for camps and moving forward so that it's at least fair and equitable for everybody that uses our facilities. Does anyone else have any questions? All in favor? Opposed? I'm going to say no.
I say no.
Motion is carried. On the bottom of page 12 is budget transfers. Can I please have a motion? Motion by Bill, seconded by Rob. Any questions? John, I have one question about this. I apologize.
Sure.
What are we spending $176,000 on printing of curriculum material in a year that we're going to see a massive cut possibly from the state? Is there any way to transition into electronic curriculum? Why, how much are we printing?
Ms. Hines would probably be the better
Yeah,
one to
John,
answer this
I
question.
can speak.
I apologize. Maybe
They
I
are
missed it. I
consumables.
apologize. Yeah.
Hi, Alex. No, and you know, I certainly understand the question, so thank you. These curriculum items are actually the workbooks and the class books that we created a few years back for our math program for all of the elementary students. Typically, when you're purchasing workbooks year to year, they could be anywhere in upwards to $200,000 or $300,000. So believe it or not, it's actually at a much cheaper rate because we do our own printing. However, my team has been working on making sure that they are also available PDF, and those are editable. So those are on Google, and we can at any time transition to that if we feel more comfortable. But at this time, I did try and put it through a grant, one of our improvement grants, hoping that that would have been approved. The state was a little finicky this year, so we are using, you know, as John said, a different source, but we can always look to transition to more of just using digital if we felt like that was necessary.
All right. Thank you for clarifying. Meredith?
And just to be clear on what Erin's saying, if we went full digital on that, we still have some students that would be impacted by us going full digital, correct?
Right. Right.
we
I mean,
couldn't-
as we work more towards, you know, a one-to-one, which I'm sure Dr. Pelletieri will discuss, you know, at a later date, yes, we would always have those inequities, but we do have the availability for any, you know, any grades or students that we do start with in the elementary schools.
Anyone else? All in favor? Opposed? Motion is carried. Number 9 is Committee on Special Education, consent agenda A through B. Can I please have a motion? Motion by Meredith, seconded by Sarah. Any questions? Matthew? You're just saying yes? Okay. All in favor? Motion is carried. Number 10 is monthly reports. Does anybody want to start? Does anybody have a report? Rob?
I'll update you on the Budget Advisory Committee. The Budget Advisory Committee is, has met a couple times. In fact, they have a scheduled meeting for tomorrow night to discuss different proposals that they could present or different options that the board maybe want to consider during budget time to purchase additional Chromebooks to get closer to that one-to-one type of district, you know, each student having their own device. You know, they've narrowed it down to where they're going to go with 3 different avenues. One being that, well, if we see a $20 million cut or a $26 million cut, this is what they might suggest. If they see a half of that cut, this is what they might suggest. If there's no cut, option 3 might be what what they might want to recommend to the Board of Education. They're working vigorously. It is a spirited group that has hit the ground running, and they're ready to roll their sleeves up and do the work.
Thank you, Rob. Anyone else? In closing, there's a couple of board discussion items. The first one is there's been chatter about live streaming, not only the budget committee, but other committees. I don't know if anybody wants to start on this. Yes, Jim?
Yeah, I believe what this discussion was put on the agenda for was because there were some individuals that did not want to have the Budget Advisory Committee meetings live streamed. Now, let me just start off by saying this should not be an adversarial discussion. I think everybody here would agree that we want all our meetings, whether it's committee meetings or board meetings or any other kind of meetings, to be as transparent as possible. So we could all agree that we start at the same spot. Now, I myself am the board representative of the Legislative Committee, and there were individuals on that committee before we met for our first meeting that did not want it live streamed. I informed them that it was going to be live streamed because that's what we do. We do not, we include everybody in the community to be able to observe our committee meetings. The individuals weren't happy, but they were okay with it. And we had our meeting and it went fine. Now, the idea that a meeting such as the Budget Advisory Committee not be live streamed only becomes a question because we're in COVID. Because otherwise the Budget Advisory Committee meeting would be in person and the doors would be open and anybody from the community that wanted to go and sit around could sit around. I myself went to one last year and there was no issues. I think the problem here is that because of COVID, there are such restrictions on in-person maximums of people that can go. That's why we, as you well know, we live stream our board meetings because there's a restriction on how many people could attend those meetings live. So, having these things open is something we've always done, and I think we all recognize is a very transparent way of doing business. To understand the open meetings law, you have to understand that if we had a live meeting, that people in that room, they could videotape that meeting. So I know there were some people that were afraid of live streaming, that some snippets could be taken off the screen and then wind up on a media website. And that could still happen, could happen here, could happen to us right now. That's just a reality of the new world we live in. And people that join committees really have to understand that's one of the things that they have to overcome. If they have a fear of that, then that may not be the right committee for them to be on. If you're going along with the open meetings law, and I remember years back when I was running board meetings, we had an individual that came and set up a tripod and videotaped every meeting. And there was nothing anybody could do about it. That he had total right to do that. The only thing in the law that makes an exception is they can't disrupt the meeting. They can't go there with big bright lights or put their cameras in front of people and disrupt the meeting. But those disruption exceptions have nothing to do with people just don't want to be viewed or recorded. You have to understand, or everybody should understand, that all our advisory committees are not necessarily subjected to the open meeting law requirement. And I'm sure Chris could get a better, give you a better understanding of that. So when I talk about open law requirement, I'm not talking about that the Budget Advisory Committee is necessary an open laws committee. It's not necessarily a fact. what we're doing there is we're saying that we have historically in Sachem opened up all our advisory committee meetings, except those that have specific reasons not to be opened. And other committee people could talk about their own particular committees. Like my legislative committee or the one that I'm the board rep on, I don't see any reason why it can't be live streamed. Right? Other people could talk about their own committees, and I'm sure Mr. Scavo will talk about the Budget Advisory Committee. But I, as a member of this board, see the Budget Advisory Committee as a meeting that should be open to the public. I don't see any reason at all that that committee not be able to be viewed by the public. If, in fact, I think, I mean, unless I'm wrong, I think tomorrow's meeting, there's an in-person part of that meeting, and at that in-person part of that meeting, people could come and they could observe. And again, I'm going to say, if people could come to the meeting tomorrow and sit there and observe and take out a cell phone and videotape it, what is the difference if somebody's home watching it live streamed? So in closing, I think that, oh, let me just say another thing too that it crossed my mind. While researching this a little bit, as far as the last meeting, we had a quorum that developed because we were 5 of us jumped on. I understand, and Chris, you could correct me if I'm wrong, that 5 members of a school board doesn't make a quorum if the members are not there to participate, that they're there to view. So other than the 2 members of the committee that were there, the other 3 that were on as just observers, not participating in any way, I don't believe, Chris could correct me, that is a violation of the open meetings law. I'm sorry, as a violation of a quorum, setting up a quorum. So, Chris could answer that for me.
I'll let you finish first before Jim, I get involved in anything. I didn't want to
Okay,
interrupt.
thank you. The other thing is, I thought there was a problem with the direction. There seemed to be some people at that meeting that were confused as to what the board direction was, what a board charge was to the committee. Now, that's a problem if that's the case. I, for one, I'll be very honest with everybody here, I don't even remember what our charge was. I really don't. I'm sure we did it at one of the meetings, but I don't remember what the charge was. I know past budget advisory committees weren't charged with finding money. That was the business superintendent's job or Mr. O'Keefe's job. Their job was just to advise on budgetary items and how to prepare the next budget, what areas we should look at, what areas should be more of concern with us. I don't remember ever a budget advisory committee saying, okay, we as a board want to purchase this. So let's have the budget advisory committee find us the money. That's not the way it was done. It was done, we as a board say, we want to purchase X number of Chromebooks. Mr. Deputy Superintendent, can you find us the money? That's the way that was done. So I was a little confused as to what the charge was or what it should be. So that's all I have right now.
Chris, you want to go first? Clayton, I'm sorry.
Sure, and I think, Jim has given a very, from my perspective, accurate assessment of open meetings law issues, but let me just clarify a few things. The only reason we're able to meet in the forum that we're meeting right now on a sort of a live stream, whether it's, pick your Facebook Live or Zoom or whatever it is because of the governor's executive orders relating to COVID. As Jim mentioned, and as I'm sure you're all aware, under normal circumstances, the open meetings law would require us to be in person, have a quorum, have an appropriately noticed meeting, published and all the things that come with that, and open to the public. Even in a meeting like that, we might have some size and space limitations. For instance, fire codes and things like that limit the number of people that we could have in an auditorium or in a room or in a building. And the fact that we hit capacity and don't have the ability, if there were 1,000 people that wanted to come to a 500-person meeting room, we might be able to turn some people away without violating the open meetings law. We've conducted an open meeting, but just like even in a courtroom has space. It's supposed to be a public trial in America, all those magical things that flow from the Magna Carta on. But, there are physical limitations to, to space in buildings all the time, irrespective of the COVID environment. And I guess the conundrum that arises now is that, as Jim said, in a public meeting, there were, we've had it historically here and in other places, individuals who, without disruption, whether they're from the media or a public person who wanted to record, they would be able to record a public meeting and take it home and do with it what they would, I suppose, unless there was some unlawful use of somebody's image for, some kind of profit-making venture that they might not be able to do. But subject to any legal limitations, it's a free country with a free press, and they've got the right to do that. What the law doesn't impose upon you, and I think this is what you're grappling with now, is that to the extent the shutdowns imposed by the governor don't prohibit you from a personal meeting of some sort, and right now you're allowed to have, your room up to 50% capacity with a maximum of 50 people in a live meeting. The law doesn't require you, if you can have a lawfully convened public meeting, to live stream that meeting. It doesn't prohibit the person who attends from, as Jim said, holding up that cell phone and making a video, or by whatever other non-disruptive means that they might choose to record it to do it. And I guess that's where your discretion gets introduced, as opposed to those other components that would just simply be requirements of open meetings law compliance, right? So it's the issue of, if you've got a committee that says, look, we can find an appropriate space with an appropriate number of people to publicly convene in compliance with the open meetings law. We notice it, we provide access to the public up to the space limitations of the building that we're in, the room that we're in, and pursuant to the executive order limitations on public gatherings. And we're doing that. And frankly, I'm not sure, historically, if you've had more than room capacity beaten down the doors to come to a budget advisory committee meeting, I think that would be a fairly atypical event. But, you do have the discretion, as long as you are open meetings law compliant in an appropriate way, to decide whether you live stream it or not. By way of example, as a district, historically, you've broadcast or played recordings of your board meetings on your radio station because you happen to have a radio station. So you're, engaging in a discretionary act of transmittal that others may not have the means to do, but certainly don't have the obligation to do. And if you decided at some point, for whatever reason, cost, time, effort, or otherwise, we don't want to put it on the radio station anymore, you wouldn't necessarily have to still be open meetings law compliant. As to, I think, Jim, I'm trying to touch on all the issues you raised so far by memory. I think the last one that I recall is the issue of quorum, right? And that's always a concern. And here's the thing. When you've got a committee of the board, you always want to make sure that, there's that distinction between the board operating as an entity and making a final determination on something, as opposed to the committee acting in, an advisory capacity, and given somebody the misapprehension, that the board as a whole is meeting and so forth. If you have appropriately noticed the meeting and it is appropriately held in public, and committees of the board are subject to the open meetings law, you certainly don't want a quorum of the board acting in that committee in a way that could be construed as an action of the board. I don't think an observer in a room watching is necessarily creating, that issue. And more importantly, if you're going to have a quorum, making sure that you've got, an appropriate notice is something that's critical. So, the mere attendance by a board member in a place where other board members are conducting business does not necessarily trigger that sort of, concern all the time. But we've always been very cautious and caution that it creates that fine line of, what is the participation of the group that's there? What are the things that are going on? Avoid the temptation to create that appearance and have those concerns. So, it is it's a behavior which requires care. And again, I think you all give so very much of your time already in the various places that you do. I think we typically don't run into a problem that, we're convening in a quorum to conduct business of the board outside of all of the other obligations that you've got. But if you get to a point where, you're having a committee meeting, and that could happen in your space uses, particularly in the committee meetings where we were talking about the potential for, redistricting and closing buildings and things like that. There might be, an enhanced interest in a number of the board members wanting to be advised of what's happening in committee structures in real time. And we'd have to make sure that we take care to manage that attendance in a way that doesn't implicate, the concerns that would come with the quorum being there in terms of the way the board is acting in that meeting and so forth. So I think, Jim, have I touched on the issues that you raised? And I'm sure that others may have them as well. I'll happily jump back in as we talk it through.
Thanks, Chris.
Thank you, Chris. You did hit each one of those items, and I appreciate the last one there, especially with the quorum question. I just want to be very clear. I'm not advocating that we should do that. I know there was a look to having 5 or more board members at a committee meeting that doesn't look good. I mean, it does start to have an appearance that we may be, kind of over supervising the community. But I just like the clarity that, because we did jump in and out, people jumped in and out last week thinking we had a quorum when we really did not. Thank you.
Rob?
And I'll speak on behalf of the Budget Advisory Committee. I did have a lengthy conversation with them over several different meetings about the streaming of the meetings. Understand a committee such as this one here that volunteers their time, to pitch in, doesn't necessarily have to fall under the same guidelines as a Board of Education, where we might have 1,500 or 2,000 people watching the meetings. Historically, if there's 10 people on the committee, traditionally there's about 4 people that show up every year, at every meeting during the course of the year. It is not a well-attended meeting where people are breaking down the doors to come in. Now, the major concerns that the committee members have, and I'm going to say the majority, because with the exception of 2 or maybe 3 out of the 10 people, don't want the meeting streamed because of the malicious acts that occur on social media, where somebody takes what they say, maybe it's a difference of opinion, and they spin it a certain way to make that individual look poorly, or in some cases even slander them. We're talking about business owners. We're talking about professionals who have seen what happens on social media, just in a difference of opinion. You have individuals that might disagree with you and just go on there and just smear your name all over the internet, and it's not what they signed up for. Now, the discussion that this committee had was that, look, when I brought it up, we want to comply with open meeting laws, and the committee said, well, can we have an open meeting? And for the people that don't feel comfortable attending, can they Zoom in and participate via Zoom? And any community member that wants to come be able to attend those meetings and comply with open meeting laws. And that's the consensus of the majority of that committee. To correct Mr. Kiernan, I did have a conversation with a gentleman from the Department of State Committee on Open Government. And actually all of our meetings that are board committee meetings are open to the public for viewing. So Diversity Task Force would have to be streamed. Audit Committee, even though you might talk about things in there, would have to be streamed. It would have to be made available to all community members. He advised me on the process that I would have to take if we're not complying with those rules and guidelines, in the form of a formal complaint to them, in which they would respond. So to say that certain groups or certain committees are not open or sanctioned to open meeting laws is incorrect. It's absolutely incorrect. So the committee is willing to allow people, to be able to come into those meetings, but at the same time, they don't want to be slandered or smeared through the mud in the process of trying to help the district. Several of the committee members said, look, we're not opposed to people coming. And you're right, Jim, people could videotape it. But it's different than people taking snippets or then writing, about that individual on a social media or several social media sites without even knowing the person, just taking what they're saying out of context and disagreeing with it. So that's the concern of the committee. Like I said, a good majority, and I thought there was consensus at the last meeting that the meetings would be run. Obviously, if tomorrow's meeting, half it's supposed to be live and the other half is supposed to be live streamed, and school is closed tomorrow, correct me if I'm wrong, Chris, when schools close, the facilities are closed, that meeting would have to be canceled at that point.
Yeah, I would cancel that meeting for tomorrow night.
Yeah, I mean, I think, I suppose there would be a way, like by way of example, if the snow had hit, and this meeting were scheduled during the snow day, you could, I guess, be in compliance with the open meetings law by having a Zoom meeting. But again, that's just an artifact of the executive orders. Under the normal operations. Even Zooming in wouldn't be an option for us, right? I know it's something that people have said that they potentially want in a new technological age. Why do we all have to convene and meet in person? But I think there's always been a standing respect and understanding of the need to convene in public for transparency purposes. And I think there's always been a skepticism on the part of the Committee on Open Government that the substitution of this kind of technology is a satisfactory substitute for an in-person live meeting accessible to the public in a facility where people can pull up, park, walk in, and so forth without some of the hurdles that they would have to jump through to sign on to a Zoom meeting. So, again, everything that we're talking about when we involve live streaming, especially to the extent that it requires, a quorum, there are real limits under normal circumstances as to how we would pull this together. Like by way of example, there are provisions in the open meetings law that would let, say, I'm board member Chris Clayton and I'm on a trip and I want to come in and Zoom in my capacity, or call in. I would have to have the clerk publicly notice that I'm going to be in this hotel room in Jersey and I'm going to be in a public place at the same time that I'm Zooming in from. Somebody would have to be able to come in and observe me participating that way. I mean, the hurdles you have to go through to still allow for those artifacts of in-person public participation are embedded in the open meetings law. So, again, just to be clear, I think, Jim and Rob have both said things that are completely accurate, that if the Budget Advisory Committee were to say as a group, we are comfortable meeting in person and want to conduct a legally convened public meeting under the provisions of the open meeting law, subject to whatever, space and gathering size limitations that the governor's executive orders impose on us. And again, to Rob's point, so far not enough people attend these things to break that number. But we don't want to live stream. As long as you are publicly convened in an open meeting that is compliant with the open meetings law, there is not that requirement to be a component of it. To Jim's point, I find that to be a valid substitution and an artifact of transparency that I think is important. That's a valid statement and a valid belief. And the board's discretion in all of this is really the point of all this, right? Because the open meetings law is what it is, and our compliance with it is not in any way subject to our discretion. However, you would have the discretion as to whether you want to broadcast the thing if it is lawfully and legally convened in person. That's where you do have the discretion.
Just the one last thing, the charge part of it. Okay, on a weekly basis, when we would meet, I would, ask the Board of Education to provide charges for the committee. After several attempts, the board didn't come up with a charge. The committee came up with a charge that they wanted to look at technology. I presented that to the board. The board all raised their hands and said, yes, absolutely. They are looking at different proposals to be able to, or recommendations for the board to consider to purchase Chromebooks. Now, sometimes there's a meeting veer to a certain direction and all of a sudden it's got to be reeled back in because we're losing sight of what the charge is. It does, and it does get reeled back in. Ron Sachs does a very good job, as does the Dick Fucci, our committee chairperson. And that happens, but the main focus of this is for the committee to be able to provide some insight as to a recommendation to purchase, in this case here, technology. In years past, it might have been looking at our operational habits to see whether or not there could be savings in the form of printing and going digital. Something that this committee did years ago. They started the ball rolling on implementing and recommendations for a student driver program, for kids to be able to do the student driver teach them. So it takes on various tasks, but ultimately what the responsibility and goal with this was to look at the budget, okay, and either say, hey, yes, it's an excellent budget, we endorse it, we went through, it looks great, or make some recommendations as to, for the board to consider. That, you're right. The job is not there to find money. That's not their job, to find money. And when it veers down that path, they do get, we do, reel everybody back in and get them back on task. So, I mean, the committee's functioning the way it's supposed to function. But like I said, the issue here at hand is that people are concerned that, given the fact of what happens on social media, it's not what they signed up for. They're willing to meet publicly in order to comply with open meeting laws. And that's really what the leaning or vote or whatever you want to call it of that committee was at the last session. So that's all I got.
Just so I could respond, because Mr. Scavo said I was wrong. And that would mean that the New York State School Board Association is wrong. That would mean that this law here, and I'll read it to you. It's only one sentence, but I'll read it to you. It's Thomas v. New York City Department of Education in 2016. Meetings of board advisory committees, which do not consist exclusively of board members, are created solely to advise and make recommendations to the board without any power to take final action, are generally not subject to the requirements of the open meetings law. I do believe that would be the Budget Advisory Committee to a T. So, and I also called the New York State School Boards Association, and they also said that board advisory committees are not subjected to the open meetings law. However, my point was, we in Sachem have always followed the open meetings law to be on the safe side whenever we were going to have a meeting using our public facilities or meeting with our advisory committees. That was my point. It wasn't a point about whether it was the open meetings law or not. It was that this is the way we've always conducted business, and I believe we should continue to conduct business that way. That was my point.
Anyone else? Rob?
Chris, if you could put together some type of legal opinion as to whether these committees are required to follow open meeting laws, and if you could provide it in our board packet, so we have more clarification on that. Because, like I said, I mean, the person was very specific that if it was a community meeting and there were community members on it, that we're supposed to comply with open meeting laws.
I'll get your written opinion so you have it.
Thank you.
Anyone else? I'll just wait for Meredith a second, just in case she has something. I know that we spoke about this a couple of times. My only concern is that I hopped into the meeting and then I hopped off, then I hopped back in. And there was a fruitful debate on whether or not they were comfortable live streaming or meeting in public or meeting in person. And I thought everybody got a fair share of their say. Everyone got a fair vote, and they voted to meet in person. And if they weren't comfortable, they could have zoomed in, but at least that room was open. My concern is that there are people that are uncomfortable. They didn't put their name on a paper and run for office like we did and open ourselves up to criticism like we did. And I think we all handle it okay. They just want to come in and help and donate some of their time to better the community and better the district. And when people are saying, well, if we're going to start live streaming, I'm going to be off of it. I don't know if that's an environment that we want to create, especially if they're following any of the rules and laws that are in place. And it seems like they are, and we'll wait for Chris's opinion, but I haven't heard different, that if they meet in public, they're okay as long as the doors are open and everyone has an opportunity to see them. I think that we should make it an environment that everyone is comfortable and they could say stuff without it landing all over social media, unless somebody does go there and videotape, but at least they know who the one person is that's videotaping. So I'm with Rob, and I'm with just the BAC as a whole. I watched them vote. They said that they didn't want to live stream it. So I think we should respect at least the group's wants and needs at this point. Anyone else? So I'm not sure how you're meeting next, Rob, but I would assume that you're meeting how we left it off. There's no motion on the floor, so it's going to be left.
My only concern is that if we don't have access to a building tomorrow, then I'm not really sure how we're going to be able to have that meeting live. for people to, to attend. I know when the date was picked, nobody was anticipating a nor'easter, was going to drop a foot of snow on our community. But and once again, this is, I guess, is a discussion that we could have with Nick Fucci and in that committee to decide whether or not the fact that the building may not be available because the school is closed tomorrow, that they might want to reconsider reconvening next week. So I'll reach out to him and see what he wants to do.
Yeah, I mean, I'd recommend you reschedule, because to the extent that a meeting is noticed as being, intended to be convened one way, and then at the last minute changing over to another way, if you've got the option of simply rescheduling, that would be, I think, an advisable thing to do. And frankly, under the circumstances, with all the school's operations likely being impacted by what we're dealing with, that's probably the best way to do it.
Sarah?
I just
Oh,
think
your hand disappeared when you raised it.
to keep it fair, that maybe we shouldn't make the legislative committee be live streamed either, because a lot of them are uncomfortable live streaming as well, I've heard. Just food for thought.
And then just the conundrum, if we're sitting and talking about the the practicality of it as well, right now you have the discretion to have a public meeting convened with live participants. But if we get a direction from the governor via executive order akin to that which we've received in the spring, where there's kind of a hard shutdown of those things, and you want to continue having those committees meet and conduct their business, in a manner that the open meetings law would consider to require a public meeting, you may have to reconsider availing yourself of the electronic platforms that would lend themselves to some of the concerns that you've been talking about. So that's just, but again, that's not a bridge you have to cross right now.
So if I could just jump in for a second. So Chris Clayton, what you're saying is that if we're going to have committees meet, they should meet in person to meet the open meetings law. And if they're going to be Zoom, they can be live streamed for now. I mean, not live streamed for now. Like, we really should have meetings in person. In other words, I think at this point,
You're right. No, that's because here's the problem arises that the provision of the open meetings law that was relaxed as a result of the COVID environment, while it relaxed things in terms of your ability to use a platform like this to still have a permissible public meeting, it imposed upon you, in order to be compliant with the open meetings law, the obligation to record it, put it on your website, create a transcript, and all that fun stuff. So with the permissiveness came some restrictions. And my suggestion to you would be that right now, at least as I'm understanding it, to the extent that the board, if this was their wish, and I understand that there's a difference of opinion between Jim and some others right now, but if the board came down on the side of saying we're okay not live streaming these things, or accommodating a request to not live stream, as long as we can still be open meetings law compliant, how would we do that, council? The answer would be, as long as you can lawfully convene in public and provide the access that you're permitted to provide and still be compliant with the open meetings law, then you wouldn't have the concurrent obligations of recordation, streaming, putting it on your website, all that fun stuff. But if in the future you get a hard shutdown where the only means available to you to convene and have a meeting is via Zoom, we're just going to call it Zoom, even though I know you can use other platforms. With that then comes the obligation to do a bunch of other things like create the transcript and record and all that fun stuff that is required in order to remain open meetings law compliant. So if you get that hard shutdown, even if you make the accommodation now, you may be presented with a conundrum in the future.
Thank you, Chris.
Thank you, guys. Also, the other discussion item is our grading policy, or how we're going to grade. I put this on there. I had a couple of people have reached out to me, and then I was talking about it with somebody else. And because we're not a one-to-one district, because we have kids that are home just learning on Google Classroom every other day, some kids are in the academy, some kids are home every other day. The elementary kids are there every single day. There's many different ways of learning here at Sachem. and it's, again, nobody's fault in this room. It's just the way where we are right this second. I just want to make sure that the way our students are being graded, and I'm not trying to make it easier for anybody, I just want to make sure that it's fair and equitable across the board. And I don't know if the administration has had a chance to have this conversation. I'm sure you have. I just don't know. I don't know where else to go with it, but I just want to make sure that, whether it's we're holding them accountable through attendance, we're holding them accountable through stuff turned in. How can we do it fairly when kids are really just not getting all of their needs met in this climate?
Well, yeah, that is a tough, that is a conundrum, and that is something that I've tasked Mrs. Hines with, and who's worked with department chairs and report card committees and administrators and teachers and parents. And really, this weighed on us a great deal, and we have done a lot of work in this area. I'm going to ask Ms. Hines to speak to some of that work. Erin?
Yeah, and thank you, Alex, for bringing it up, because it is something that weighs heavily on all of us, but certainly me, being tasked with making sure. It's a really tough, item for every district. And I think anybody reading in the newspapers, and certainly I've been honored to be on Newsday from time to time around it, there's great inequities across all of the districts when it comes to learning, right? So it depends on where you are. For us, though, what we went through last spring and the pass fail and trying to get everybody on the same page, we knew that we would never completely get on the same page, but we can work to make sure that everyone felt like what was going on was fair. So everything from making sure that protocols in Google are more consistent. So asking our teachers not to post assignments or anything in Stream, but on classwork, so that parents and students knew exactly where it was. To looking at students more holistically. This is not a traditional year, giving people some time to hand in things a little bit more, a few days later than maybe what's normal. We also asked that everybody give assessments at the same time in the same manner. So for example, if it's okay for one group of students to have an assessment taken home, then that should mean that every child should have that ability to do that. We also heard a lot from our community about, please, let's not try and waste time when students are in class for testing. There are some tests that are appropriate, especially in math and science, where students do need to be taking it either in a lab setting or in a certain manner. So we definitely recognize that. But I have to tell you, our first round of report cards went out for the secondary buildings, and I was concerned. Both Chris and I were concerned, what would the feedback be like? And at first we were kind of, okay, bated breath, but our teachers hit it out of the park. I really feel like they worked hard to make sure that the kids got to hand in their work. Anybody was late, was given extra time. People were contacting, and what we had asked our folks to do in making sure that the kids, this is a tough time for everybody. We don't know what their life is like right now. We're trying our best to give devices to everybody that we can. But to just please look at this with more compassion and making sure that you are equitably offering what you can to your students, no matter what the learning model is. And I know that's a little long-winded, but hopefully, Alex, that helps everyone here know that we've been spending months on this, and we will continue to spend months the rest of the school year on this, because we don't know what's going to happen with the regents. We don't know where the students are going to fall in terms of their curriculum and their learning. This past month, when I met with our chairs, the number one talking point was, we've made it through half of the year. The students are progressing. While they may not be exactly where we always are traditionally, they are progressing and moving forward, and that's K-12. But I've asked all of the chairs to work with their departments to look at their curriculum and making sure that we are attending to those big idea items that we know will be on, a state assessment. And if there's anything that we can maybe not take as much time in, and making sure that all the things that are really the most important are definitely taught and understood, then that's the direction that we want to go. But, every day we're constantly looking at new ways that we can offer more equitable instruction as best as we can.
Thank you so much. Does anyone have any questions? Rob?
Erin, thank you so much for the explanation. Like Alex, I've gotten some phone calls and some emails, and they've spoken to some community members that have asked to reach out to me regarding this very similar thing. And
Right.
some of the very frustrating things that I'm hearing, and I'm sure most of the board members might be hearing, is that you're getting children that love school in a traditional setting, and now we have a hybrid setting, and there are things that are outside of their control to be able to come to school that normally would not be. And for example, if I would have a student with a headache, last year, the kid would work through the headache and come to school and maybe take aspirin. But now that headache prohibits them from coming to school, or a stomach ache, or cough, or contact with somebody. And now what that does is that puts them behind. And the disturbing thing that I'm hearing is that kids that are traditionally making honor rolls and being inducted into honor societies who have had 92, 94, 95 averages and now getting 70s and 80s on quizzes. And I think part of the problem is that when they have to miss 2 days or 3 days or 2 weeks, and there's not the ability to have the live streaming, it kind of puts a child at a disadvantage. Are we doing anything? I mean, my 29th year teaching is the first time that I'm finding myself curving stuff, and saying, and waiting and saying, all right, I understand, your brother tested positive for COVID. I'm not going to hold that against you. I'm just going to excuse you for today. And I'm only going to grade them on the days that they're with me, granted that they have a valid excuse and a valid reason that's documented. Are we doing that? I know some districts around us have amended their grading system to be able to, get a better snapshot of what the child really is, outside of the hindrances of, having to go get tested, several times, or having to, to miss coursework because he came into contact with somebody on the bus. Have we amended our grading system to allow for that?
Yes, and thank you, Rob, because I think I forgot to add that in there. I did ask the chairs to work with their departments, and I do have on a Google Sheet for anybody that would like to be able to see that here on the board. We took a look at what were our grading practices and policies in the past and what we were looking to amend them for this year. So we do have quite a bit of change across our departments, but I think you hit it on the nail. It's about just having the heart and compassion to say, you know what, this may not be the child that I need to worry about or the time I need to worry about holding everybody to the line. People have lots of different things going on in their life. And so when I said compassion before, I think that's why we didn't really hear much negative feedback about this first quarter, because I do believe that our teachers and our administrators are hearing us and working with us and doing that. But the live streaming is another major piece. And I know we started talking about live streaming over the summertime. It was a goal that we've always aspired. And, I don't want to take away, anybody's thunder here, but I know Mr. O'Keefe and certainly Dr. Pelletier have been working with myself and Mr. Renda, and Mr. Lee Manuel now. And we're at the point where we can start to really realize live streaming come, the end of January, and possibly start doing some, piloting days at more extensively, because we do have it going on where we can see it. But yes, we did amend our grading policies, to go back to what you had originally asked, where departments felt like they could do that. And I'm happy to share that information with you or any member of the board.
That would be great. Thank you, Erin.
No problem.
Anyone else? Great. Does anybody have any future agenda items for discussion? Seeing no hands. Rob, I'm sorry. Yep.
And Dr. Pale, I don't want to put you on the spot. I know that, some school districts have talked about, in fact, my BOCES services 18 different school districts, and we're learning, literally today during the day, several school districts have decided to go remote Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday of next week. And I know that's something that Superintendents Association has talked about. Have you given any thought to that?
Without a doubt, we gave thought to that. If we limped into Thanksgiving, we are dragging ourselves through to this holiday break. And so that is something that we have looked at very closely. And the idea that my sense was we needed that time returning from the break, as opposed to, I didn't want to do it both ends,
Okay.
before the break and after the break as well. We'll take one last look at it Friday, but I think we're up against it at this point. And I think the best plan would be to do that when we come out of that break.
Great. Thank you.
Of course.
Anyone else?
Question.
Yeah, Sarah, please. I'm sorry.
You're gonna pilot a distance, have a distance learning pilot day for the middle school and CTM East, because they haven't done distance learning the way most have.
They haven't done that type of learning yet. I know that there is time in the day in terms of where we carved out minutes for folks to do some distance learning, reaching out to their students in Google Classroom. There's some time where we could possibly do that over the next several days, either Friday, Monday, Tuesday, or Wednesday of next week. But as far as dedicating an entire day to practicing that, my sense we would be better served using that time, that week we return, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, to alleviate that practice concern.
Anyone else? Our next meeting of the Board of Education will be Wednesday, January 6th, 2021 at 7:30. Right now, we're in the Board of Ed room at Samoset. Can I please have a motion and a second to enter into executive session to discuss the employment of a particular personnel? Motion by Matthew, seconded by Meredith. All in favor? Can I just get some hand gestures from some others? Thank you. Opposed? We are adjourned. Merry Christmas, Happy Hanukkah, Happy Holidays. Stay safe, everyone. Good night.
Happy holidays.
Night. Merry Christmas, Happy New Year, Happy Hanukkah.